People who do not keep kosher often say how difficult it is, but actually keeping kosher is not really difficult in and of itself. What makes it difficult to keep is the fact that the rest of the world doesn't keep it. As we shall see, the basic underlying rules are fairly simple. If you buy your meat at a kosher butcher and buy only kosher certified products at the market, the only thing you really need to think about is the separation of meat and dairy. Keeping kosher only becomes difficult when you try to eat in non-kosher restaurants or at the home of a person who does not keep kosher. In those situations, a lack of knowledge about the host's ingredients and food preparation make it very difficult to keep kosher. Some commentators, both Jewish and Christian, have pointed out that this may well have been part of what God had in mind, as it makes it more difficult for practicing Jews to socialize with those who do not share the same religion. Although the details of kashrut are extensive, the laws all derive from a few fairly simple, straightforward rules. 1. Certain animals may not be eaten at all, and this restriction includes the flesh, organs, eggs and milk of the forbidden animals. Number 2. Of the animals that may be eaten, the birds and mammals must be killed in accordance to Jewish law. 3. All blood must be drained from the meat and poultry or broiled out before it is eaten. 4. Certain parts of permitted animals may not be eaten. 5. Fruits and vegetables are permitted but must be inspected for bugs. 6. Meat can't be eaten with dairy. 7. Surfaces and utensils that have come into contact with non-kosher food may not be used with kosher food. 8. Grape products made by non-Jews may not be eaten. And then there are a few other rules that are not universal. So let's look at this in a little more detail. The Torah says that of the beasts of the earth, you may eat any animals that have cloven hooves and chews its cud. And any land mammal that doesn't have both these qualities is forbidden. Of the things that are in the waters, it says you may eat anything with fins and scales. Thus shellfish such as lobsters, oysters and shrimp are all forbidden, while fish like tuna and carp are permitted. For birds, the criteria is a little less clear, as the Torah provides a list of forbidden birds but doesn't specify why the particular birds are forbidden, although all of the birds that are forbidden are scavengers. Of the winged swarming things, aka winged insects, a few are specifically permitted, but scholars are no longer certain which ones they are, so all have been forbidden in modern kosher laws. Rodents, reptiles, amphibians and insects are all forbidden, and any product derived from these forbidden animals such as their milk, eggs, fat or organs also can't be eaten. The mammals and birds that may be eaten must be slaughtered in accordance with Jewish law. They may not eat mammals that died of natural causes or that were killed by other animals. In addition, the animal must have no disease or flaws at the time of slaughter, and these restrictions don't really apply to fish. The Torah bans the eating of blood, and this is the only dietary law that has a reason that's specified in the Torah, and that is that they don't eat blood because the life of the animal is contained within the blood. This applies only to the blood of birds and mammals, and not to fish. Thus, it is necessary to remove all blood from the flesh of kosher animals. All fruits and vegetables are kosher, however bugs and worms that may be found in some of them are certainly not kosher. So fruits and vegetables that are prone to this sort of thing should be inspected to make sure they contain no bugs. On 3 separate occasions, the Torah says not to boil a kid in its mother's milk. And the Oral Torah explains that this passage both prohibits eating meat and dairy together, and the rabbis extended this to include not eating milk and poultry together. In the most strictest forms, the separation includes not only the foods themselves, but also utensils, pots, pans, the plates, and the dishwater or dishpans in which they are cleaned, and the sponges which they are cleaned with. A kosher household will have at least 2 sets of pots and pans, one for meat and one for dairy. A practicing Jew must wait a significant amount of time between eating meat and dairy, and opinions differ and vary from 3 to 6 hours. This is possibly the most complicated section of the kosher laws, and was briefly mentioned in the last sections. Utensils must also be kosher. A utensil picks up the kosher or status of the food that's cooked in it or eaten off it, and it transmits that status back to the next food that's cooked or eaten off it. Thus, if you cook chicken soup in a saucepan, it becomes meat, and if you afterwards use it to heat up some warm milk, the status of the pan is transmitted to the milk, and the status of the milk is transmitted to the pan, making both the pan and milk a forbidden mixture. This is generally only applied to hot foods, and the rules are quite complicated, so if you're really interested, I recommend you have a look for yourself. The restrictions on grape products derive from the laws against using products of idolatry. Wine was commonly used in the rituals of all ancient religions, and wine was routinely sanctified for pagan purposes, while it was being processed. For this reason, the use of wines and other grape products made by non-Jews was prohibited. So if, like me, you're not a Jew, you can be thankful that you don't have to follow these laws, as kosher is definitely hard to keep unless you live in a major city with a Jewish community. Certainly the laws were intended to keep people of Jewish heritage separate from other cultures, and it's likely one of the reasons that Jewish culture has survived the diaspora and maintained a clear identity in our modern world. Thank you very much for watching. There will be more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned for more and make sure to share on sites like Reddit and Facebook.